আমার মুক্তি আলোয় আলোয় এই আকাশে আমার মুক্তি আলোয় আলোয়. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this another session. This means the second session of our initiative, Talking Tagore. Now, as many of you know, this initiative was actually sparked off by a book which we had reviewed in the platforms of Kahaani Koncerti, written by Professor Sushanta Dattagupta, who is here with us. And the book was about basically looking into that whether between 1921 and 2021, Visva Bharati vision betrayed. So we were really looking, he was really looking at the various ways to assess whether we have actually betrayed the vision of poet Tagore, particularly in context with Visva Bharati and his dreams. So that was the initiative we had taken. Around the same point of time, we had also discussed another book by Dr. Dasgupta on the history of Sriniketan. So we were all in that realm of Tagore and his vision. Now, we decided to take this vision thing forward. And so Kahaani Koncerti, that is the platform which says that they're connecting culture, we decided to initially start off with a Facebook page and run a few chat shows. There'll be more coming up, and bring in eminent guests to throw some light on this issue of the vision betrayed. So the first edition that we had, and this is on YouTube, it had a very good responses when we had Dr. Martin Kemchin talking to us, really talking to Sushanta. I was barely moderating, as I will be doing today. So today we go to the second such session of inviting with us Dr. Dipankar Dasgupta. Now, when I had requested Dr. Dasgupta to send a small little note about himself, he had initially started by saying that not much really. Now, how much is that not much? How less is that not much is something that you have to decide, because he's an economist by profession, and he has studied in Presidency College. I think, Dipankar, you passed out in 63, your graduation in 63. Right. Then he did his master's from Kolkata University and went on to do his doctorate from Rochester University, where he did his PhD, came back to India and started teaching at Indian Statistical Institute. Now, he has also taught elsewhere in places like Canada, Hong Kong, Japan, and he's also interested in creative writing, and he sings. You're into vocal music, so we might just till the end might ask you to sing. No, please. Well, Sushanta did it once when we were discussing his book, and he actually sang Bhoyoti Chobocho Maji. And he has also been awarded the Best Teacher Award from Bongio Orthoniti Porishad. So that's Dipankar, and I'm taking the liberty of calling him Dipankar. And here is Sushanta, who and I keep talking. And Sushanta is one of India's eminent material physicists. Now, don't ask me what that means. This is above my pay grade, but yes, he is immaterial. Is material physicist, right?
No, it's immaterial, I say.
Okay, fine. That's what it is. But he has been the vice chancellor of Visva Bharati for 5 years, and now he stays mostly in Shantiniketan, writes books, and also writes interesting short plays, which are partly based on imagination between Jagadish Bose and Rabindranath having a dialogue and on matters. So he has another book which we are extracts of, which we'll now be publishing in the group, in the page that we have in Facebook called Talking Tagore, because this whole thing is branded under the umbrella of Talking Tagore. So that's on his book on essays on Shantiniketan, walks in the ashram, as it is called. So that is where we are. Please go to our page, Talking Tagore, on Facebook. Very soon we'll be having a website, but till then we are using the page in Facebook to communicate with our group. And I'm very happy to tell all of you all that so far, large number of people have joined that group. And some of them who are voluntarily, I also don't know them. I don't think you all know them either, but then there seems to be a lot of interest generating. And I hope this time around we'll be getting a lot of interested people coming from Bangladesh. Now, having given that introduction, but then I have a Dasgupta, I have a Dattagupta. So if I were to take on the story that Rabindranath had asked Kiti Mohan Sen when he was getting too many Sens and Dasguptas into the framework of Shantiniketan, I believe Tagore had told him ki your etaki Bodhibati bani dicho. Maybe your Bodhibati, as you know, is another place. So that is this joke that goes about. Today, I think we have a Bodhibati like situation with Dipankar and Sushanta. Am I right? In saying that.
Well, you also mentioned Uma Dasgupta, so
Oh yeah,
you definitely,
yeah.
I mean, you're definitely a Barendra crushed under three Buddhis.
Yes. So today is not the first time you started it. We are only the second phase of your Buddhavati program.
Correct.
Yeah, the
Second or third. Very well. No, you did have a European.
I did have a European. Yes, I did have a European. Who I think is either in between a Brahmo or a Bodhi in any case. Martin Kempchen is somewhere in between now.
Apparently, somebody, a former vice chancellor, is to refer to Martin Kempchen as KM Sen.
Okay, so you have another Buddha there.
Another Buddha party there. Okay, now to come to this thing of talking Tagore, Dipankar, what I really want to ask you is that, do you think, okay, so Tagore had a vision, so Tagore had Shantiniketan or Visva Bharati, really, that's where we are focusing, and Sriniketan, so it was a very dream that he was trying to implement. Up to a point, post his death, even early years of Indian independence, probably we were also in that still thing of that Visva Bharati was different, very, very different. But over a period of time, I think what has happened, and we all think that has happened, and Sushanta Das' book has given us a bigger trigger, that we have lost the vision somewhere on the way. Not only have we lost it, I think there has been either it is the mechanism or the people or the politics or the system have somewhat corrupted that vision. So not only have we dropped the vision on the roadside, the vision has also become, I mean, it has been a man-made thing of corrupting the vision. Now, two things here. Do you think that is what has happened? And if you think so, we like to discuss, all of us, as to what is the way forward. Now, just to give you an example, talking about way forward, the last time we discussed with Dr. Martin Kempchen and Sushanta, they were talking about having little schools outside of Visva Bharati, particularly the one in Purulia. What is it called, Sushanta, that Purulia school?
This is in Adivasi. This is, I mean, at the moment I'm just forgetting the school, but we'll have it. But if you allow me, before Dipankar starts,
please.
Let me just to bring in some focus into our discussion, and since the time is not too long, you see, remember, while with Martin Kempchen as well, what we were trying to say is that the vision of Tagore is very large, universal, all-encompassing. And so we have to explore areas in which the vision actually extends beyond even Shantiniketan and Visva Bharati. And so instead of looking into negative things, we should look in a more positive framework about how the vision has been even replicated maybe elsewhere. And one of the things that Martin mentioned was actually his Ghoshaldanga experiment, his interaction with street children from Sialda railway station, etc., etc. So in that vein, I think that where Dipankar's contribution would be extremely valuable are in the following two areas. See, the great vision of Tagore was to actually start education from the very roots, namely schools. And as you know, this Brahmacharya ashram was made into a Patavavan, Brahmacharya ashram in 1900, made into Patavavan in 1925, and Shikha Shatru in Sriniketan in 1924. So school education where you start from the very roots and you give education which is actually very emancipated, where partitions are broken, where it's a science or an economics student can also learn music, learn drama, etc. Now, Dipankar actually has written a book on his experience in his school, South Point School, when it got started. I think it's called 15 Mandeville Gardens, 15 or 16, I don't remember.
16, yes.
16 Mandeville Gardens, where it all started. And when I read that book, I felt that though, it was not explicitly mentioned that Mr. Shochikanta Guha was at all influenced by Tagore or not, but the kind of education that was imparted in that school, in South Point School, in the beginning at least, was really shackle-free, in which he had teachers of English like the great theater personalities like Utpal Dotto and this former St. Xavier's College professor, and then Kamal Mujumdar, etc., for drama. So, this. And this is where he blossomed, he told me, that when he went to South Point. So maybe it is that experience that he can narrate. And the second one, so there are two things I think which are very, very important in Tagore's vision, which is his emphasis on school education, where you start from the very roots. And the other one is in Sriniketan, where you link up with the community and you go into, therefore, agriculture. And the Shikha Shatra school was meant for harnessing the local talents in weaving, pottery, etc., etc. And in that regard, he had as his lieutenant, Professor Prashanta Chandra Mahalanabish, who was his secretary. And in fact, Tagore goaded him to apply even statistics to agriculture, especially after his visits to Russia, where he wrote Russia Chithi. And so Sriniketan is another fantastic idea that Tagore had. What is happening there is something that we're not discussing. But again, bringing in Prashanta Mahalanabish, then Mahalanabish went on to initiate the Indian Statistical Institute, where Dipankar spent much of his academic and active life. And so, and in fact, when I had visited the ISI campus of BT Road, I have seen, semblance of Sriniketan being replicated there, with farming, etc., with cows around, etc. And so Mahalanabish also, along with doing statistics, had this idea of community bonding. So these are the 2 points, I think, where we can focus and have the real expertise of Dipankar extracted out of him. Of course, he is free to talk about anything else.
So, shall I begin?
Yeah, please.
Okay. I think Sushanta has brought up 2 issues on which I think I would love to talk. But at some point, I want to revert back to Sushanta's book, actually, the Vision Betrayed, that book, and especially, as I've already told him, I've discussed this book several times with him, especially the chapter where he deals with a letter that Tagore received from Jadunath Sarkar, Professor Jadunath Sarkar, and Tagore's response. I thought that was that chapter really impressed me a lot, because I think there's a great deal of food for thought there. Having said that, let me go back to where Sushanta wanted me to start. My own school experience, let's say. Now, to give you a very brief historical detail, which anybody who's read the book, my book, 16 Mandeville Gardens, would know. And that is that I started out as a young boy. I started out as a very indifferent student. I was a very indifferent student wherever I went, whichever schools I attended. And I was growing up, and I think I was about 11 or 12 years old at that time, and my family had really started worrying about my future. I think that's too early an age for a family to worry about a child's future. But those days, or maybe even these days, parents tend to take certain things too seriously, whatever that may be. There was a point at which it was decided that I should be taken out of the school I was attending, because I was surely going to flunk my exams and I would never be promoted to the next grade. And then they started looking around for schools for me, and it is in fact the case that not a single school, not a single well-known school to which they took me over for admission agreed to admit me after seeing my whatever admission examinations they held, after going through them. So I was rejected, and I was put into some sort of a local school which had the reputation of admitting only students who were failures elsewhere. There were Bengali phrases which people use jokingly. And that's the school I was attending. Now, at that point of time, someone, maybe a neighbor, drew my mother's attention to the fact that there was this new school that had come into existence, and it was apparently a different kind of school. And she suggested to my mother that they might go and have a look at what was happening there. Upon which, it was not my mother, but my father went there with my elder brother, and they met this person whose name was Mr. Shoti-Kanto Guho. Shoti-Kanto Guho, who had built this school, South Point, then known as South Point School, and it had only one campus at that time at 16 Mandeville Gardens. It was not a high-rise building as it is now. It was a little, that's where you might find links with Shantiniketan, Sushanta. There were little cottages, or almost little cottages where our classes were held. What distinguished this school? I'll tell you something that is very personal and something that's very general. Let me go to the general thing first. What distinguished the school was the kind of faculty it had. And as Sushanta has already told you, amongst its faculty was the well-known thespian, Mr. Utpal Datta, and who taught us English language. There was Mr. N. Vishwanathan, who was actually simultaneously teaching, I think, in the morning classes at St. Xavier's College.
Yeah, that's what I mentioned.
Yeah, right. As far as I know. And there were a fairly large number of such people, but Utpal Datta was certainly the most famous of them, although Utpal Datta had not yet reached his actual fame as a thespian at that time, but he was a amateur actor, mainly a stage actor. He had still to attract people on the screen. But Utpal Datta is what Utpal Datta was, and generally speaking, let me start off with this, that when I went there, I was a student of class 7, okay? And Utpal Datta introduced me to Shakespeare, all his students to Shakespeare. And his way of introducing was not just, reading out Shakespeare in the original to class 7 students, mind you, in the city of Calcutta, where most of us were Bengalis, and our English was not really that high class. But that's what he was doing. Not only that, whenever he found the time, he actually made us participate in stage productions of Shakespeare. So that made a difference. We were not just hearing about Shakespeare, we were part of Shakespeare, we were doing Shakespeare. So I still remember the first play that he wanted me to act in was A Midsummer Night's Dream. I had never even heard of these things before I joined South Point School. I had never even heard of Shakespeare, for that matter. I don't think I knew even how to spell his name. Okay, now, but he had a way of teaching which made me feel that, I had always known this guy. Because, Upal Datta, when he was teaching, he was acting at the same time, and he was taking us right there, right to the center stage of what you might call, quote unquote, English literature, okay, through the medium of drama. Now that can be a medium of education, as I learned. Now that, there were others also, but I'm speaking mostly about Upal Datta right now because we don't have that much time. Other teachers were there also who were equally interesting and who were equally original and really not to be found elsewhere in other schools. Now, this had a tremendous impact on me at that age. And so let me go to the personal level now. The impact was that I stood first in the class in the first examination that I took there. Now, when I came back home and told them that I was declared first in the class, my own people wouldn't believe me because I was being thrown out of a school. I was taken out of that school because they didn't know what was going to happen to me. And here I come to a new place and they say I stood first in the class. So the conclusion was this could have happened only because the other students were equally bad. And I was the best among the bads. Okay, that was a general reaction. Now, well, I accepted that, but I was happy at school because at school, nobody said that to me. And Mr. Shotikanta had a fascinating way of operating. And here I think, some of the things that have come up in that chapter in Sushanta's book would come up. What Jodhanath Sarkar had accused almost Tagore of being, rising above the institution being essentially named after Tagore, something like that. It was not exactly named, but without Tagore, Visva Bharati is meaningless. So the personality rising above the institution. Now, this is something, I don't know where Shotikanta Babu found his ideas, whether Tagore influenced him or not. I don't really think that Tagore had directly influenced him so much because he didn't have a Sriniketan equivalent in his part of the world. He loved going to Great Eastern Hotel that time at those days, attending dinners and cabaret dances and so on. He was all into it, with which you can't quite compare Tagore. But the more important thing was that he was pretty much invisible in the school. He had built the school. One doesn't know from where he got these ideas. He got together these strange people who had absolutely no link with it. Most of them had no link with the world of education, but he brought them over because he thought they could do a whole lot of good. Okay, and he asked them, okay, I have given you this piece, this place. Now you use your ideas and make it into a paradise for these children, which they did without any kind of intervention, I think, from Mr. Guha. Now, this
so, Dipankar, just a small point, a point of commonality that I could see between the early vision of Tagore in Visva Bharati and the South Point School of Mr. Sojikanto Guho, is that he had teachers who came there not for salary, but for the enjoyment of
Yes,
education.
yes, yes.
I mean, Vishwanathan, Utpal Datto,
All
Kamal
of them.
Babu, etc.
All of them.
They came for the love of it, just as Bidushankar Shastri, Nepal
Right,
Babu,
right, right.
etc., Jagananda Babu, in the beginning, Kiti Mohan Sen, they came for the love of uh, imparting knowledge to small children, etc., etc. So salary was not really a concern
Probably
there,
not. Yes, no, no, no,
which is
no.
something that is very interesting. And other thing was, as I probably felt after reading your book on 16 Mandeville Gardens, is that Mr. Guho had brought in a kind of a partition-free educational system where you're teaching English, but you're teaching also drama, Shakespeare, etc. And through drama, through enacting characters, English nuances are being transmitted. And so, it's just like very much an integrated view of a holistic view of
Of course,
education.
of course, of
Right,
course.
right. Sorry
Now,
about, yeah.
now that you've said this, um, I want to go back to some of the things that I found in your book, and Professor Jyotirnath Sarkar, he's saying that you've got this little school here, and you're now thinking of starting a university, but you don't realize that there should be this 4 years of college training through which they get prepared for the university. Okay,
He called it rigorous education,
rigorous education, and now
which he felt was lacking in the
absolutely.
concept of a
I
university.
really, he had his point, but I again, I could not help but looking at it through my own experiences, from the point of view of because I think this school had done things to me, and it did change my life in a very, very important way. Now, one of the things that I experienced, let me tell you. So, after finishing South Point School, I went to Presidency College. I was admitted to Presidency College for those 4 years that Professor Jyotirnath Sarkar is talking about. But in some of the subjects, one of them being English, another being Bengali, and the third being mathematics. I think these are 3 very important subjects. I discovered that in Presidency College, no lesser place than Presidency College, I was not learning anything new. I had already been taught all those things in my school. So much so, let me tell you what happened to me when I was taking my BA examination. Okay, I did economics, as you said, as you know, but we had these past course subjects, right? And so we had English and other subjects. Especially for English, I remember that I did not prepare for those examinations, the final examinations, the university examinations. I did not prepare for those examinations because, you see, I had read everything that was there in the syllabus of Calcutta University through my exposure to Mr. Utpal Dutt's teaching. I had read most of those things in school. So I still remember that, one of the questions that that was there in the papers, in one of the papers, was this was on one of the texts that we had, Julius Caesar, and one of the questions was, how does Brutus justify his murder of Caesar? Now, I still remember Then I answered that question, and I answered it quoting straight away from Brutus's speech in Shakespeare without preparing for this examination at all, because I remembered all that from school. I had been asked to play Brutus. I had played Brutus's role on the stage, and what you learn at that age, it takes a lot of time to forget, right? So I was writing out without any problem. Now, that's where, again, I remember today, especially when I was thinking about it, this 4-year training that we are talking about, okay, how important is it? Isn't it possible that you can impart a lot of that even at the school level? I know from my own experience that it is possible. Now, I admit, this may not have been the experience of all my classmates. That's possible. Maybe it affects different students differently. But I am talking about myself, and I know that it could be done. It could be done, provided you had the freedom to do it, that the teacher had the freedom to do it, which the teachers in South Point School had the freedom. They were teaching whatever they liked, and they liked all sorts of things, so much so that in class 9 and 10, those were the days where school education finished in class 10. At the end of class 10, we had a school final examination. Now, class 9 and 10 has a board syllabus, okay? And Mr. Dattagupta was teaching us that board syllabus. He finished that syllabus in the first 3 months of class 9. It was done. And then there was no further reference to the school final examinations which was coming up. No reference at all. What were we studying? We were studying A Tale of Two Cities, Charles Dickens, and many other things of that nature. No further reference to the curriculum of the board. And not that it affected us at all, because we were ready for the board exams, long before the board exams were actually arrived. Okay. In the very first 3 months of class 9, he finished that. He said, enough of that. We are done. Let's now do more interesting things. And we were happy. So you see, schooling can be this also. Now, when I think of a person like Tagore, when I think of that person, let me read something, Sushanta. I have it open right in front of me. When Mr. Jodhinath Sarkar is saying, I accept that the whole truth, when, however, you offer extracts of the Vedanta through poetry, religious discourse, or prose, it immediately pierces my mind. I accept that as the whole truth because the power of your argument is such that it manifests as nothing but the truth in my mind, emotion, and heart. Additionally, I believe that what you express in words are your true experiences in life. But when a 10-year-old Bolpur child starts reciting Universal Man, hidden pathos, they appear to be as incongruous as the sound of whales emanating from the mouth of sardines. Now, this is what Mr. Sarkar said. Now, I then started thinking, well. I was reciting Shakespeare as a student of class 8. I was reciting Milton as a student of class 7. I was reciting Tennyson as a student of class 9, maybe. Now, what was I reciting? Well, was it quite incongruous as the sound of whales emanating from the mouth of sardines? Now, how should I look at it? Now, I tend to think that I wasn't doing anything of that sort, okay? If I were doing anything of that sort, then the career that followed would have probably shown that. I think that I don't think that I approve myself to be one of the very successful academicians, but whatever I am, I think I have had my share of success. Okay, it's not that I was a sardine, quite a sardine, trying to do whatever he said. So this is something that one has to keep in mind. Maybe the student matters also. The one who's being taught has to be sensitive. That also matters, I'm sure. But when someone like Mr. Upaldatta teaches, or when someone like Tagore teaches, let's say, I think teaching becomes quite a different game. It's not quite just going to 4 years of college and what was that expression that you exact knowledge, in pursuit of exact knowledge. I think that exact knowledge comes to the student if he's sensitive. From that point of view, although I think Mr. Jadunath Sarkar had a point, he definitely did have a point, but I think that he was a little unfair to Tagore in the way he described Tagore's experiment. There was an element of either unfairness or a bit of misunderstanding. Maybe he did not quite see through what was happening. Now, having said that, there's something else I must say. Now, all this is true for someone like me who went through this system and so on and so forth. But that school itself did not quite survive. That school changed, and it changed during Mr. Guha's own lifetime when he was at the helm of affairs. He changed it. He changed it. Those little cottages became a huge building, a high-rise building of sorts. And it was just like any other school competing, and doing whatever else was necessary. So for some reason, and Utpal and all these other people had left. They had nothing to do with the school anymore. And the people who were teaching were, not even sad imitations of what I saw. Okay. Now, why was it necessary for this to happen? This is where I don't have a good answer to that question, but I think that it was inevitable because I don't see. I think it's inevitable. It was inevitable when I read through Sushanta's book and whatever little idea I have of Visva Bharati, Shantiniketan, the schools there and so on, whatever little idea I have of the Indian Statistical Institute, which Prashanta Mahalanobis had started with a certain vision, a somewhat Tagore-like vision, and my own junior school, okay? That probably they're beautiful things. Probably some people benefit from those things, but probably they're not sustainable. Now, why that is the case, maybe Sushanta will have something to say on that, but this is my basic reaction to the kind of thing Sushanta wanted me to talk about.
Can I just come in here for a minute, Dipankar?
Yeah, sure.
I'm so happy you mentioned South Point School, because actually I was also a student of South Point, 16 Mandeville Gardens, in fact, but then the difference was that I was taken, and many of us, we were admitted in the perambulator. The mother had.
Okay, very young.
So, yeah. So we were there on the first day. I think somewhere down the line, if ever that archive thing is found, probably my name will be there. And yes, the cottages were there, and Miss Robin, who,
Oh, yes, Miss Robin. Yeah.
yeah, Miss Robin.
I remember her.
And we used to be petrified of her. And yes, one day an English teacher walks into the classroom. I don't know, must be some junior, very, very junior class. And he says, he looks around and looks at me and says, "Hey, bang." So I said, do I look, my first thing was that, bang, am I a frog? So I was then told, I was selected to be bang, but then I realized this was all for his Hojoborolo, where I had to play the role of the bang. So one badge that I keep carrying still is that my first director on stage was Utpal Datta. That was, something. Which is why I was able to relate so much to what you were saying. But now comes my one question. You talked about Utpal Datta, you talked about, that those kind of teachers, and yes, there was also a question, how many students could take those kind of teachers? I'm sure there were so many in your class batchmates who probably did not, could recite Brutus. I mean, you were answering Brutus because you had done the play of, you had rolled. Is there two things? One, I can also understand why those multi-storieds came up on 16 Balling, those cottages went and the whole aura was gone. It was probably commercialization. They were in the Guinness Book of World Record, I'm told, at some point of time for maximum number. And then whatever happened, changed hands. But we have not had anything even in Bengal. Maybe Patho Bhavan was somewhat close to this. But if you were to leave out South Point in your time and Patho Bhavan later, except, some of these new projects that Sushanta and Martin were talking about last time, unfortunately, we have not had any such institutions coming up, which may have had a parallel to Visva Bharati, Patho Bhavan and Sriniketan. Also, do you think there has been a dearth of teachers like Utpal Datta who could sort of carry through the students with them?
Yeah, I definitely think so. But let's put it this way: Utpal Datta did not really think of himself as a professional teacher, in my opinion. No? He came there because he found it great fun to do whatever he was doing. He knew that he was teaching because he was a very sincere teacher, the way he corrected our, exercises and so on and so forth. But if you were to compare him to a standard teacher in any other school, I'm not sure that he would be too happy, because he had his own world where he had his own children there, these young fellows sitting there and absorbing him, and it was great fun for him to introduce his students to the world of English literature as he understood. In fact, I remember on one particular occasion, he said, in that, I'll tell you that the kind of difficulties the students faced at home, having been Utpal Datta's student, that was that, he was talking about what in those days were very adult material. Okay. And it was a co-educational school, mind you. And we were sitting there absorbing, things which, love was a 4-letter word when I was at that age. And he gave us an exercise. How does Shakespeare describe his lady love in sonnet number such and such? I came back home with that. And they were up in arms. What's this? What's going on there? I'll use a Bengali word. That's the kind of thing that was said. And I didn't know what to do. And I was ordered not to do that exercise. But he was very strict as a teacher, He would want that exercise. What do I do? I somehow managed, I probably hid myself somewhere and prepared some sort of an answer for him. But at home, they knew that I didn't do it. They didn't accept it. Even the child who's benefiting from it his parents did not quite accept it. Now, Sushanta, you will know much better about this than I do. Now, I would like to know, Rabindranath, okay? I mean, leave alone all the other things about him. But if I know a man to be romantic, I mean, I think of Rabindranath, the first name that comes to my mind, highly romantic. Love is not love was not a four-letter word for him. Now, he was writing all these songs, love songs. Prem is a major part of his collection. Those were being taught to the students, and those students were also pretty young students. Okay, now, what sort of an experience? I have a feeling that he did not have quite the sort of experience that Utpal Datta as a teacher had, sitting in the heart of Calcutta, where middle-class parents thought that no, this is going too far. And then one day he told us in his class that, I'm sure that your parents will object to your reading such and such text. He had asked us to read something, I'm sure. But in that case, you tell your parents that there is so much yet left to read, that if I don't read it now, when the hell am I going to read it? At what age will I read it? By then, I will not have enough time to read the rest of the things that I'll need to read. Tell your parents that. He said that in our class. And he said that that's true not only of English, but also of your mother tongue, Bengali. You should read all those. Read your Bankim Chandra Raya now. Don't leave it for when you're 40 years old. Read it now and tell your parents that if I don't read it now, then at 40 years old, when I'm 40 years old, that will be too late. My life will be lost. That's what he told us. But at the same time, I'm sure when my father heard that he was teaching us Chaucer, I was a student of class 8. He was teaching us Chaucer, mind you. And my father just said, oh, God, this was exactly his action. Is this what's happening in that school? Well, we had to face that. Utpal Datta had to face that, but he didn't stop. He continued to do whatever he wanted to do, and thank God he did. He made my life interesting. Even today, I enjoy thinking back about the beauty of English literature as revealed to me by this great man. And I think Rabindranath was definitely a greater man. Utpal Datta was great, definitely. But given the diversity of Rabindranath, I think he was greater. Okay, I'm not really making any comparisons, but this is obvious. And so Rabindranath was trying to do something which Jadunath Sarkar seems to be saying should not have been done. He is reacting the way my father reacted to Chaucer. I may be wrong, Sushanta. I may be. I was very impressed.
No, I think this is wonderfully said. Sujit Sannal has rationed our time, but let me, Dipankar, since you're now there, I want to bring in the simile also between Tagore and Mahalanobis. Sujit, both Dipankar and I had the great fortune, I think, and both of us think, of having gone and experienced the American university system in the late 60s and early 70s. And Dipankar mentioned something earlier on which I think we can have a more detailed discussion, where personalities become more important than institutions. This did not happen in any of the American universities that we have experienced.
True.
However, there's one thing that was there, which is also there in Mahalanobis's ISI and Tagore's Visva Bharati in the beginning, is to keep the door open. Education is universal. You have visitors, you have people from all different countries come and assimilate together. to enrich yourself. So if you think of, I mean, as you know, Tagore had umpteen number of visitors from China, from Japan, from UK, from Ireland, Scotland, Germany, America, and Mahalanobis. I do not know of any other institution builder in India other than Tagore and Mahalanobis who have had such a plethora of foreign visitors. And so this is emancipated education. So this is what I think Dipankar must have experienced also in the Indian Statistical Institute. Now he raised the question about what has happened today? What has happened to South Point School? There's concrete structures and all that. With are there such great quality teachers that he had earlier, or are there great quality teachers like Bidushekhar Shastri and Kitimohan Sen and Nepal Babu and Jaganananda Babu in Visva Bharati anymore? So, well, again, Dipankar and I are driven by mathematics a bit. We understand the meaning of the phrase entropy. Entropy means disorder. So entropy has taken over. Entropy has taken over in such a way that today we have so many rules, regulations, etc., that we can't have visitors from outside, come and spend 6 months, a year, 2 years here. This is extremely difficult. And so we are cocooned. ISI has become cocoon. Visva Bharati has become cocoon, and so has, of course, South Point School, where you have only local teachers. And so anyway, so this is one thing that we have to reflect upon later on. But Mahalanobis, the experiment that he did there, and as you know, that he started out a journal called Sankhya, which was internationally reputed. It has still got a lot of reputation, but it was a top journal in statistics. So so these are the things that he got. And the other thing that, as you know, is that ISI had in its faculty at that time people from all parts of India, not only abroad, but all parts of India. I mean, their mathematics program has some stalwarts whose names are very well known, even to the audience here, who came mostly from Tamil Nadu, actually. Well, Rangarao was not from Tamil Nadu, from Andhra, but others, and also C.R. Rao from Andhra, Karnataka border. But anyway, so a lot of people from the south, from the north came and came there. We don't see that now anymore. So, the answer is there, but maybe it needs a more detailed discussion later on. But I can see that that Mahalanobis must have imbibed a lot of these value systems from none other than Tagore. Because if you read Tagore and also read my book, Uma Dasgupta's book, that Tagore's focus from 1920 onwards, Elmhurst, Kalimohan Ghosh, Dinabandhu Andrews, they're all in Sriniketan. And then his visits abroad, his intersection with scientists, and visits to Russia, where, and Dipankar as an economist would appreciate that Tagore thought about using tractors for farming, where he felt that it's economically more viable for the peasants in our country. So, so the Sriniketan is such an important component, which again, I felt was replicated a bit in ISI. So maybe Dipankar can add to this, and then we are
yes,
dependent. So, yes.
Unfortunately, you see, I don't. Yes, unfortunately, I would say, this is something that you are not aware of, Sushanta. But unfortunately, the day I joined the Indian Statistical Institute was the day that Professor Mahalanobis died.
Oh,
that was frankly, having worked there all my life, having been a regular faculty member. I have retired from there as a professor of economics. But I am one of those unfortunate fellows who had never seen Professor Mahalanobis in person, because he decided to leave the world when he heard that I was going to join ISI, maybe. I don't know. But the thing is, but so I did not quite see the man, the operative part of the man, how he actually used to operate. What I've heard from others, stories I've heard from others. So, but nonetheless, I did see what he had left behind. When a man of that stature builds something, it lasts for a while, even if much of it gets destroyed in future, because there aren't others. This is where the question of the person rising above the institution comes in. But you have to need an institution builder like him to continue to make things go on. But what I found in ISI, I'll tell you, my most interesting experience as a faculty member, I joined as an associate professor, and at some point I became a professor, and I retired as a professor. So I've been teaching different courses in ISI. No one ever told me what the syllabus should be. No one. What was the syllabus for my courses? Whatever research topic happened to interest me at that point of time. I just went to the class and taught simply whatever I like to teach. No one told me, oh, look, here are the details of the syllabus. Maybe there was something like that, but no one cared. No one asked any questions about it. Now this, I don't think you'll find this in too many institutions. So much freedom given to a teacher. I had just returned from abroad, so I was bubbling with new discoveries, new things that were found in America or Europe and other places, and I was dying to talk about them. I mean, I could not keep on writing paper after paper and giving seminar after seminar. I needed to do that on a daily basis. I needed very intelligent students. No, that was not South Point School anymore. When I joined ISI had the best students possible. So when you take a class, when you deliver a lecture to your students in ISI, you have to be very careful, because they will catch you. They will catch you immediately. You make one mistake, they'll catch you. How I gained, first is how I gained. First, I was teaching whatever I wanted to know, not what other people had taught before me or what was written there in the law books. There were lots of new things happening, new research papers coming out in new areas. I was learning them, and whatever I thought I could use in my class. The students, as I said, were very bright. Mathematics was never a barrier for them, and my area has always been mathematical economics. So happily, I went on teaching all that stuff. And more importantly, these brilliant students kept me on my toes in such a way that whenever I committed a mistake, knowingly or unknowingly, they would point it out and then immediately start making me think. I'll tell you what, most of the research papers that I've written and published were outputs of my teaching experience in ISI and the criticism I received back from the students. Now, how could this have happened if the institution did not have a builder who had instilled this from the very beginning? Okay, and that is the way I would describe to you my experience. As you know, I'm not an empirical economist. I don't go to the fields. I don't do agricultural economics or whatever, But I'm a completely theoretical person And I gained by teaching in ISI, because ISI was made that way. It told you, just teach whatever new thing you want to teach. Mr. Professor Mahalanobis allowed that. And then his student, C.R. Rao, he allowed that also. His C.R. Rao is one of the greatest statisticians to be ever born. Okay, and he received the equivalent of the Nobel Prize in statistics only recently, 103 years old, I believe. Now, that is,
Bharadhan also received the Abel Prize, which is
right.
equivalent to Nobel.
But that brings me to the last question, which I just want you all to very briefly tell me, both of y'all. These institution builders are no longer there. And in institutional builder, I'm not only talking about Tagore or Sushanta Mahalanobis, I mean, including Jyotikanta Guha, and there were many other in little pockets here and there who allowed. So these visions are no longer there. The these teachers are not there. Like the way you said you were teaching Dipankar, like you were learning instead of so much of teaching, So this and you were not quite bothered with chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter
Absolutely.
4. And that is exactly the way that Tagore, and this is what the Sushanta Das book talks about. So what now? I believe in Bangladesh, there is some look to create a kind of a Visva Bharati. I don't know, this is what we'll have to figure out a little more, not exactly Visva Bharati, but, using Tagore's model of education. We will be talking to somebody from Bangladesh very soon, but that's when we will probably get to know a little more. So what now? How are we going to bridge this gap?
I want to take up that point a little. Sushanta mentioned universities that he has been to in the United States. I have been to a few also. And Sushanta was very, very clear that, none of those universities carry the name of the person who built. You never hear of that at all. Or for that matter, you go to Oxford, you go to Cambridge, you may hear that, Newton was here. But no, that's not how the university came into being. The university is here. Whether Newton was there or not is another matter. He decided to go and roost there. That may be the case. But no, the university doesn't depend on the individual. That's true of Harvard. That's true of MIT. That's true of many of the other schools that we have been to, that we have seen. But my own feeling is that it's not a particular name that matters. What matters is there is a body of people who run these institutes. Now they have certain beliefs about how to run the institute. That must be true of Harvard. That must be true of Oxford. That must be true of Cambridge. Italy. What was the place you mentioned? Italy, Bologna. Was that what you talked about? Anyway, I think my feeling is that these people who run these institutes believe in that most significant thing, the word freedom. The freedom of the teacher. And along with this, the freedom of the students. The freedom of the students not to throw stones. No. Freedom of the students to think. And the teacher is given complete freedom. In America, where in America, or at least where in the best schools in America, do you find a syllabus for a course? I had never found one, and wherever I've taught in America also, or in Canada, or wherever, I was never told that this is exact, unless I was teaching to a very specific undergraduate class, let's say, syllabus never mattered.
I think that point has been very well made. Freedom. Yeah. I think you said the word that.
Freedom is what is important to keep the institutions going. If there is someone looking down your spine all the time, then you lose that freedom. Utpal Datta would not have been able to inculcate what he did in us, had Shodhikanta Guho been calling him every day to his office and instructing him or asking him, Mr. Dutt, what did you do today? I don't think anybody ever asked him that. No one had, I wouldn't say that no one had the courage to ask, no one even cared. They had left it to him. Let this man go and play there, because we trust him so much that his playing there would make the students into great players themselves.
Excellent.
I don't say that that works for every student. Yes, that cannot. But it has a point. If you want to build an institution, that doesn't mean that you create 1,000 or 2,000 Nobel laureates from that institution. No. But you create a lot of very good students who in turn create other very good students. That's what an institution should be all about, I think.
Absolutely agree. Sushanta, anything to comment on that as a closing line from you?
Well, I think we have covered a lot of grounds, and there are issues which have come up which probably need even more discussions. Incidentally, the age is catching up, so I couldn't mention the name of the Purulia school. It's called Felix School.
Yes.
And
yes.
on the Felix School, we expect Kaushik Basu and I to have a discussion from the school in Purulia. So that's one name that came to my mind. And yeah, right. Yeah.
So I think, my take on today's chat or Adda, it's been a wonderful Adda, if you ask me. That's what I was really looking for. Is that it's given us a different dimension into, when we are revisiting Tagore's vision. So while they may not be, Tagore is not there, and even Prashanta Maulanobish and some others, and we have even talked about Shodhikanta Guho. I think what you shared with us, Dipankar, is a new dimension and perspective to the issue that we are trying to do, broadly calling revisiting Tagore's vision. And as Sushanta says, that I think we need to have more such in-depth discussions on you raised a lot of very important points today. And maybe, Sushanta, when we talked to Dr. Basu on that Phyllis School of Purulia, where apparently I believe he gives some elementary teaching in the game theory. And that's really mind-boggling. In a village school in Purulia, eminent economist Kaushik Basu comes and talks about the game theory in their own language.
And the other very striking thing, which we don't see now, especially in my state, is that very young students are speaking in English, because that school deliberately inculcates English instruction, which I think is also very important, because if we want to be internationally linked, if we want our students to do well outside of our own state, then we should remember that English is no longer a colonial language. It is a language of, the international communication. Even Germany and France, which are very chauvinistic about their languages, when it comes to publications and international journals, they have now all switched to English, and we are moving away from it. We had an advantage vis-a-vis China and Japan and other Asian countries, but we seem to be losing that. And Felix School is actually a striking contrary example, where small children do not hesitate to speak to you very fluently in English.
Lovely. How lovely. So once again, we are ending on a positive note, and we do hope that.
So this is another thing about Tagore as well. Maulanobish and Shodhikanta Guho, Utpal Datta, etc., that though they had equal emphasis on Matribhasha and Bengali, English was not shunned even by Tagore. In many of his writings and letters, etc., to Andrews, etc., he's using English. So you have to have a combination of that. So this will take us to another dimension.
Exactly.
Actually, Sushanta, there's just one small point I want to make in connection to what you said. The language question, just as you say that you should allow students or introduce methods to make the students understand this universal language, which is English, But at the same time, again, going back to my experience with Utpal Datta, okay, I would say that while you're doing that, you can at the same time prepare them to love their own mother tongue.
Absolutely.
For
Absolutely.
example, Utpal Datta never taught us, in those days, in most schools, English was taught in Bengali, of course. The teacher was speaking in Bengali. As a result, the students hardly ever learned how to speak in English, how to write Bengali or English, leave alone speaking, okay? But Utpal Datta was such a strange person. He would often go back to Bengali in the middle of his classes, okay? And start reciting from no less a thing than, let's say, Meghnad Bodh. And why did he do that? To tell us how Michael chose his words. He said, what kind of a word do you think he chose to describe a bow, as in bow and arrow? Bow. What was it? What did he call it? That's when I first heard of it. He said he called it Kodondo. Kodondo, that is a completely different sound to it, He was teaching this in his English class. And so how much more opening of the minds can you imagine? That's why I said, give the teacher the freedom. And of course, the teacher has to deserve that freedom. I mean,
Exactly.
you can't have anybody and everybody doing that, but yes.
I think that's a wonderful note to end this chat. And thank you very much, Dipankar Da and Sushanta for joining Kahaani Koncerti. And we do hope that we'll be having more such addas online and even some live. And that's what we are planning, that we should be talking, to small groups of people, students and others, and, discussing this whole issue with them in different parts of the country. So with that, I will close this program today. And I would like to tell our viewers that third, fourth editions, please keep tracking us on the Facebook page, and we'll be giving you all the information. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
আমার